So as a medical or event director, you may ask, what are the types of equipment I need for an effective communications program? I think the first thing that I would recommend, and we use this in a number of events, large and small, is incorporating the use of amateur ham radio operators into your system. These are a group of individuals throughout the country that have a solid understanding of how to use radios, bring their own radios, and will support numerous events. So I suggest that you take a look at some of those clubs that may be in your area. Reach out and see if you can make a partnership with them to make it happen. If that's not available, or even maybe as a secondary form of communications, there are the ability to rent digital radios. These commercial radios need to have a repeater system on them so they can be used over a wide geographic area. Using point-to-point radios that you might buy at Radio Shack or things like that are really not recommended. So you need to have a commercial grade radio to support what you're doing. And in addition to that, we talked about having that central command, the place for these communications to go, to be evaluated, and then addressed back out so people understand what is happening, particularly your medical leadership and your public safety partners.
All right, so I'm Rob Orr, and I'm representing the 120 ham radio operators that are helping support the Chicago Marathon. Ham radio operators are licensed by the Federal Communications Commission in this country. We are basically volunteers. We get into this hobby because it's a way for us to learn about radio and electronics, to experiment with those things, and then also to provide public service, which is what we're doing here. What we use for equipment is fairly sophisticated radio equipment. These things are not toys. These are rather expensive, $300 or $400 a piece. And the reason that we're here is that, yeah, there's lots of things you can use out there to communicate with, cell phones and small radios and that sort of thing, but they tend to be not very robust, and they can break down when there's a big emergency. So that's why we try to set up equipment. It's really the professionals, the police or fire would use. It's really the same kind of equipment. You can, for your races or events, you can get a hold of ham radio operators like ourselves by going to clubs. There are clubs all around the world where we are organized. We have 120 for the Chicago Marathon, and that represents about 10 different clubs that we're using, and we're drawing from 4 cities from the entire Midwest area. So what do we do here? Well, our job here is to provide communication from the field, from the doctors in the field who are at the various aid stations, back to the forward command area where they can get dispatch if they need to have an ambulance sent, or if they need some advice from the top doctor, in this case Dr. Champus, they can talk one-on-one to each other. Or if they're short of supplies, or they need supplies, or if they're a logistics issue, we are their lifeline or their communication line back here. What we found was that a lot of the doctors don't like to be encumbered with phones or radios. They like to do their job, and so it's better to have real communication experts helping them out. That's really the role we play in a way, is that we serve as sort of professional communicators and are able to get information passed very quickly and very succinctly, whereas a lot of people who are not professionals or haven't thought about it very much tend to be a little crude at the way that they kind of try to get their communications done. So it can be kind of a struggle sometimes. Our event is a big event, 120 people, but it can be scaled way down to something with maybe 10 or 15 or even 30. It really depends on the kind of event, what you're trying to do, how much you're trying to corral. We are supporting the medical team, but other events support maybe the logistics side. Maybe if you got an event where you're trying to support bikers, you want to get more wheels, or people who have flat tires, get that out there. So it can be designed to support whatever event you're doing on any scale. You can just scale it up or scale it back. The principle is still the same. You have one place where information comes, and you have webs that are out farther that can bring the information to you, and you just use radio as your resource. We tend to be much more robust than the other public networks because we're independent from those things. We can work on batteries, for instance, and that's why they often use our services in emergencies. We can throw together a radio system and be on the air in minutes, whereas if your phone system goes down, you're down for days. So that's why often we're called in when there are really bad disasters to be the first folks to start bringing information back from the outside. So that's really the purpose of our role here, and we're glad to be part of the Chicago Marathon. It's been a growing role for us. We've been learning more and more about how we can support them and vice versa. And we feel very comfortable at the moment being right with the medical teams, because that's the group that needs our communication services the most.